في العصور الوسطى ونقل المعرفة، وتستكشف أبحاثه كيفية لعب المخطوطات الإسلامية دورا محوريا في الحياة الفكرية والثقافية للعالم الإسلامي، حيث كانت بمثابة وسائل لنشر المعرفة في مجالات مختلفة مثل الفلسفة والعلم.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank the School of Calligraphy and Ornamentation of Fujairah, not only for having me, but also for the important work that they are carrying out. Thank you to Dr. Ezra Al-Hamal, and thank you to Dr. Khaled. It's a pleasure to be here and to share with all of you some aspects of my research on the Spanish Aljamiado corpus. Well, as you may know, I'm specialized in history of the Spanish language, so this is my first time giving a presentation in English, so I apologize for any mistake. So, as you may know, among Spanish Muslims in the early modern period, the Arabic language was supplanted by the vernacular Romance languages, Aljamiya. From this term, Aljamiya, used in Arabic to denote linguistic otherness, comes the Spanish words Aljamia and Aljamiado. Initially, Aljamiado referred to Spanish-speaking Muslims, Moro Aljamiado, but it later came to describe the system of writing the language, Spanish, Aragonese, Catalan, using the Arabic script. Aljamiado text preserved the clandestine Islamic culture of the Mudéjares and Moriscos, the last Spanish Muslim communities who were forced to convert to Christianity in the 16th century. Although officially Christians, Moriscos kept practicing Islam secretly in their homes, a fact that led them to the Inquisition tribunals and finally to the expulsion from Spain at the beginning of the 17th century. From the ports of Valencia and Catalonia, more than 300,000 Spanish Muslims were expelled from the country, most of them to North Africa and other places of the Ottoman Empire, where they began a new life in freedom. But before leaving Spain, they hid their Islamic books in secret places within their homes, such as inside walls and false ceilings, likely with the hope of returning one day. But the truth is that no one returned, and these books remained hidden for centuries within the walls of the Morisco houses until the late 19th century, when the first major discovery took place and when scientific studies on Aljamiado began. Since then, these documents have attracted the attention of researchers from various fields, such as linguistics, literature, history, Islamic studies, though only a few have explored the distinct features of the Arabic script in which they are written. The aim of my presentation is to offer a description, an overview, a general overview of Aljamiado writing based on the data we have so far. However, before that, let me provide some details about the chronological, geographical, and thematic context of this production. The majority of the Aljamiado documents can be traced to the 16th century, though it's likely that some were composed in the 15th century or even earlier in the final 14th century. That is during the Mudéjar period, when the Spanish Muslims were still able to freely practice Islam. This corpus extends into the first years of the 17th century up until the expulsion of the Moriscos from Spain and their subsequent exile across the Mediterranean. Morisco authors who relocated mainly to cities within the Ottoman Empire, Algiers, Tunis, Istanbul, Thessaloniki, produced a body of literature that, while essentially is a continuation of the Aljamiado tradition, also presents some differences from the texts written in the Iberian Peninsula. One key difference is the transition from using Arabic script to Latin script for writing in Spanish, a step that can be understood as a result of progressive acculturation and the consequent loss of ability to write in Arabic script. Most of the Aljamiado documents come from small villages in Aragon, a region in the northeast of the Iberian Peninsula, where there was a high concentration of Muslim inhabitants, especially in the valley of the Ebro River. In this fertile area of Spain, far from the main cultural centers of the country, most of the Moriscos worked as farmers and artisans, while others traveled through the region as merchants, sometimes carrying books from one place to another. The most significant discovery of Aljamiado manuscripts took place at the end of the 19th century in this village, Almonacid de la Sierra, in the province of Zaragoza, where around 100 Aljamiado and Arabic books of various genres and were found in two Morisco houses. Almonacid de la Sierra was one of the largest known production centers linked to the Escribano family and their professional workshop. However, there must have been other important workshops in neighboring villages, such as Muel, also in the province of Zaragoza, where some of the most ornamented Aljamiado manuscripts were produced, Mesones, Villafelice, and other places of the region. In this way, the Aljamiado corpus constitutes the writing manifestation of a local and rural form of Islam adapted to a sociocultural environment where religious practice became day by day more challenging. Moriscos compiled a wide range of contents in their books, and sometimes, based on the contents, we can see different types of calligraphy or different manners of calligraphy. Of course, the Quran, with many copies, such as this beautiful and ornamented copy of Muhammad Cordillero from Gea de Albarracín in the southern part of Aragon. It is a fragmentary bilingual copy with a consecutive Aljamiado translation. You can see here, for example, Surah Al-Fatiha, first the Arabic text vocalized in red and green, followed by the Spanish translation vocalized in black. So you can read, Las loores son a Allah, Señor de todas las cosas jalecadas, a translation of Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Another important chapter of the Aljamiado production is the legal literature within the framework of the Maliki tradition, such as this copy of the Breviario Sunni, a Mudehar legal treatise composed by Isa de Jebir, faqih of the town of Segovia, and one of the most influential figures of the late Spanish Islam. We have also theological treatises, as this translation of the Tanbih al-Ghafilin by Abu Layth al-Samarkandi, which was very popular among the Moriscos according to the several copies that we know. Additionally, this manuscript from the village of Muel is one of the finest examples of Aljamiado ornamentation, along with the previous Quran of Muhammad Cordillero. There are also many examples of narrative literature with stories of the Prophet Muhammad and Musa, Ibrahim, Isa, and Islamic heroes such as Dulcarnain and his recontamiento del Rey Alexandre that you can see here. There are also exemplary stories such as the Historia de la Doncella Arcayona, the story of the handless maiden, daughter of the Christian king of India, who converted to Islam, a folk tale of which we have several versions that present a model of persistence in the faith to be followed by Moriscos. And also eschatological tales such as the many versions of the Al-Hadith del Día del Judicio, the account of Yawm ad-Din, including this copy from Almonacid de la Sierra. Another popular genre among the Moriscos was didactic literature, which includes several sapiential tests, like this bilingual copy with interlinear translation of the Kitab al-Shihab by Al-Qudai. For several wasaya, such as this copy of the Al-Wasiyya of Ali ibn Abi Talib, a collection of moral advice from God to Ali, a central figure in this literature. There is also travel literature, including clandestine itineraries for leaving Spain to Turkey, and also pilgrimage accounts such as this memorial of Omar Patón, who traveled from Spain, from the town of Avila to Mecca at the end of the 15th century. Poetic compositions also played a role in the Aljamiado corpus, such as this beautiful Poema de Yusuf, a versified story of the Prophet Yusuf. There are also collections of medical prescriptions and even magical recipes, which was very popular among the Moriscos, such as the large book of talismans known as Libro de Dichos Maravillosos, also found in Almonacid de la Sierra. You can see here the figures of Maimun the Black and Barcan Lighting Light, magic tradition that has to be understood in any case as part of popular beliefs, as well as notes, letters, or domestic records of buying and selling, also written in Aljamiado. The copying and preservation of Aljamiado books were the responsibility of local scholars, most of whom were al-faqihs, fuqaha. These local intellectuals were responsible for selecting Arabic works and for translation to support Islamic education of the respective aljamas or congregations. However, in the final phase of the Morisco period, this role transitioned from those trained scholars with some knowledge of Arabic to individuals who took on community leadership roles while also working in other professions, such as farmers, artisans, merchants, and who, strictly speaking, were not always scholars. As a result, Aljamiado manuscripts display a certain degree of variation in material quality, handwriting, and calligraphic style, as you can see in these examples. These differences can be attributed to several factors. First, the contents of the volume. For example, copying the Quran is not the same as copying medical or magical recipes, personal notes, etc. Second, the recipient of the copy. Consider, for example, a personal copy for an individual and his family versus a community copy meant to be kept at the local mosque. The available resources, always bearing in mind the precarious economic situation of most Moriscos, especially in the last period. And finally, the skills of the copyist. While there were professional scribes and book merchants, such as the Scribano family, not all were affiliated with a guild or a formal workshop. Many engaged in scribal work alongside other professions, while others were itinerant scribes who traveled and worked through the region, sometimes in exchange for nothing more than food and shelter. But regardless the quality of the copies, of the skills of the scribes, Aljamiado texts present a range of features, some common to the Maghreb script and others that seem more typical, more common in the Mudéjar Morisco tradition. These features may suggest the development of a particular style or type or manner or styles of the Western graphic tradition, which evolved in Spain during the 16th and early 17th centuries. This hypothesis does not exclude the possibility of internal diversity based on the ideographic features of each scribe, different workshops, the graphic trends of the moment, and the place of training of the copyist. In this regard, we know, for example, that some of the Aragonese Muslims learned to write Arabic in other places outside the region, such as cultural centers of the neighboring Kingdom of Valencia, where Arabic was still spoken. We also know that some scribes from North Africa were present in Aragon as visitors or temporary workers. A quick look at the Aljamiado documents, without going for the moment into the specific of the writing, reveals a distinctive appearance that seems to differ from what we might loosely recognize as North African script. Let's see, for example, this manuscript from the National Library of France, produced probably in the first years of the 17th century. This is a fragment of the account of the death of the Prophet Muhammad. We can see here a pronounced archaic look evident in the size and the weight of the letters, which are usually larger and heavier than those of the Maghrebi Andalusi script, consistent thickness of the pen strokes with almost no variation, a preference for straight lines, though there are also fine examples of beautiful rounded script in Aljamiado, the marked angularity of some letters, and a wide letter spacing that contributes to a high degree of legibility. In any case, this is just an example of the general traces of the documents. As Aljamiado paleography develops, we will gain a full understanding of the writing practices of these communities. For now, in an attempt to bring order to what has been said so far, I will refer here to some of these frequent features, which I will illustrate with examples of documents of different origins and chronologies. The first feature concerns the dotting of fa and kaf, as in the Maghreb script. This is a constant feature in Aljamiado, such that kaf is always represented with a single diacritical point above the tail, as you can see in the word brocado, and fa with a diacritical point below it, as in fuerte, that means strong. There are no exceptions to this rule, although we do find manuscripts with marginalia where kaf and fa are represented according to Masoreki conventions, of course due to the hands of Orientals, owners of the volume. While in Arabic, it is necessary to use hamza to support the vowel in combination with the initial alif. In Aljamiado, it is very often omitted, with the vowel being directly supported on the alif, like in the figures 3 and 4, y manteca, aquel día. The use of hamza becomes necessary only in combination with fatha, if what is to be represented is the Spanish vowel sound e, as you can see in ST, this, figure 6, or 9, figure 5. Another common feature of the Aljamiado script, which we can also find in Maghrebi writing styles, is the elongated and rectangular shape acquired by some letters. This can be seen in the case of the hook of kaf, like in the word quien, who, and the box of the emphatic consonants like sad and ta in la sirat. According to Maghrebi conventions also, some Aljamiado manuscripts show an oversized loop of ain and ghain, especially when they appear in the initial position. We can see here the large loop of ain in the case of Ali and Alehi, and gain in the case of guardate, that means refrain. On the other hand, on a phonetic level, confusions between these two letters are frequent in some tests, indicating the loss of the guttural value of ain in Arabic words used by the Moriscos. Forms like ngali instead of ali or gami instead of ami are not uncommon. Concerning dal and dal, it is very frequent in Aljamiado the angular tracing of the hook with varying degrees of openness, like you can see here in the case of edan and el dia, a day. This angular form, very common in Aljamiado, is quite similar to certain shapes of this letter in Kufic styles. Also regular in Aljamiado is the placement of the tashdid depending on the vowel combination. I mean, in combination with fatha, for example, fechas, facts, figure 13, and dhamma, ojos, eyes, figure 14, it is written above above the body of the letter. However, with kasra, pienso, concern, figure 15, it is placed below. Note also that in combination with fatha, the word is written below the tashdid rather than above, as it is common in other Arabic styles. Also regarding tashdid, it is interesting to note the significant variability in the shape. Although the most common forms are a semicircular shape, like in peñas, rocks, figure 16, and a W shape, Allahumma, figure 18, artificial and exaggerated representations of this grapheme are not uncommon. Like, for example, in La Paloma, the dove, figure 19. Note also that in combination with Dhamma, an shaped ligature is frequently created, as you can see in Disho, figure 17, that means he said. From a linguistic perspective, confusion is frequent in the representation of certain Spanish sounds, such as pe, che, and ye, which in Aljamiado system need tashdid. This confusion, very frequent, can manifest as either overuse, for example, in the case of bienes instead of bienes, goods, and omission in cases like palabras instead of palabras, words. Regarding final letters, the descendants of lam, nun, shin, sad, da, and kaf are usually artificially elongated into large loops or balls, like in Jibril, Dayunen, Onsas, sometimes extending below and wrapping around the following letters or words. However, the opposite tendency can also be noticed, with the descendants being shortened into a flat tail, as in mil, gran, disho. Both tendencies can be even found in the work of the same scribe, as you can see in these examples, all of them of the same hand. In contrast, there is a preference for concave forms of the tail of min with contained elongation, while convex forms are also common in Maghrebi writing. You can see here the cases of alimu or aleikum with this concave contained tail. As in the Maghrebi script, the marbuta in isolated position takes the shape of angular 6, as you can see here in Al-Qudratu or Al-Hayat. There is also some variability in the representation of Hamza. While the inverted 2 shape is most common, as in enojo, anger, figure 32, or en esta noche, tonight, figure 33, other shapes are also frequent, such as an inverted comma in en estos, this, figure 34, or just a simple dot as in escuridades, darkness, figure 35. Like in other Arabic writing styles, diacritical points of final letters, such as ba, ta, fa, nun, are placed at the beginning of the letters rather than in the center, as you can see in Ya Resucito or El Bien. When Ya appears in the final position and serves as a prolongation letter, it features a returning tail with the 2 dots placed in the middle of the final loop, like in An-Nabi. When it appears as an isolated letter, the body is often omitted, reducing Ya to just the returning tail, as you can see in Al-Ladi. We can finally add to these features, to this selection of features, the high stroke of initial ba, as is common in Maghrebi script, which we also find in Aljamiado, although restricted to the initial ba of the basmala, as you can see here. Well, the data available from Mudéjar and Morisco manuscripts allow us to identify a series of frequent or predominant features that define the Aljamiado script. While many of these features are shared with the Maghreb script, others seems to be more common in the Aljamiado graphic tradition. However, given the still limited development of Aljamiado paleography and the fact that much of this corpus still needs to be analyzed, conclusions must be provisional. Further analysis of the entire corpus and its evolution over time and space is still required. I think there are two important questions here. Can we identify specific features that differentiate early manuscripts produced by the Mudejares from those of the later Moriscos? I don't know. To what extent could geography influence handwriting evolution and the emergence of different calligraphic schools in the region of Aragon? Well, this work is just the starting point for answering these questions. Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation, and I'm so happy to see all the work that you have already done in describing the Aljamiado, which is so unknown and so much in need of further research. So really, thank you for the bottom of my heart
Thank you very much.
as a Spanish. But I wanted to, I have certain questions because I had looked a little bit at some Aljamiado manuscripts, and I was really wondering about the tools that they were using. Have you found any references to whether they were using a kalam or whether they were using like a quill, the way that the Christian scribes would have been using at that time? Do you know if there was any common implements that they were using?
Well, as you can see in the title of the presentation, they use pens. They use Christian pens.
Okay.
They use Christian pens because some of these scribes also work as scribes for Christians. So the professional sector of scribes who write only Islamic manuscripts is not. I don't know how to say in English. It's not in Spanish. It's rentable económicamente.
Rentable, yes.
So it is necessary to work in other sectors, like for example, as a scribe for Christians. But in any case, we know also some discoveries of manuscripts where we have found also pens and sorry for my English, and elements for writing. So definitely pen is the
So when you mean pens, you mean like metal pens or quills made from a
pen, like pen of
una pluma?
Pluma. That's the word.
Sorry, and I just had a second question regarding the use of sheen for the S sound, because this is another thing that I saw consistently. They, instead of putting the letter C, they put sheen for the sound
Sheen,
that would be S. Do you think that the way it was pronounced at the time would be like losh instead
No,
of
probably not.
los?
No. No, from
So
a
what is the
linguistic perspective,
explanation?
there is no, I think that there is no difference with the Spanish spoken by the Christians. So no, they use shin for the sound S of Spanish, and they use shin with tashdid for the ancient sound she of the Spanish, now he. But there is no difference between the Spanish or the Aragonese spoken by the Christian and the language spoken by the Moriscos.
Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank
I
you.
would like you, as a linguist, to ask you if there is a corpus for Aljamiado. Is it published somewhere, digitalized, so for researchers in order to be involved and to know more about it?
Yeah, of course. We have the manuscripts. We have digital copies of the manuscripts. The majority of the manuscripts of Almonacid de la Sierra, the major discovery, are in the CSIC in Madrid, and we have copies of all of them. The manuscripts of Muel are in the Biblioteca Nacional de España, and we have also copies of them. And there are also manuscripts around the world in London, Oxford, Uppsala, Cambridge, and other places. And we have copies of most of them. In addition, we have editions of this corpus. In the University of Oviedo, we have the main collection, the Colección de Literatura Española Aljamiado Morisca. But in any case, the materials we have edited until now is only a small part of this production. So the problem is that to arrive to a conclusion, to know exactly what kind of production is this, we have to edit more tests, more manuscripts. So that's the point. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
I had a very similar question to Nuria, actually the same question, but I noticed there was one instance where the scene didn't have any dots from the examples that you showed. So, but I actually have another question apart from that, because you already answered it. I've noticed, as an ignorant person towards this type of corpus, that those manuscripts I've seen, the Aljamiado that I've seen so far, the Doctus is quite particular. The Doctus is very much like very, very similar to those of foreigners who learned to write Arabic, like British and German people, you know, the old Orientalists. It's very kind of non-flowing and quite, you know, angular. And I wonder whether that has something to do with the fact, and I'm asking everybody here really, that maybe some of the scribes didn't actually know the language and were not speakers of the language, or how is that explained? It's very particular doctors.
Yeah, well, many of these scribes, especially in the last period, don't know Arabic. So that's the point. So at the same time, I think that in some manuscripts there is like a it's like a exercise, like a pedagogical part, that like a learning. You have, for example, the test of a good calligraphy, a good ductus, and then you have the continuation with a bad calligraphy. So sometimes I think that this is we have to understand this as part of a learning project or a learning process. So I don't know if I'm answering your question. Probably not.
I'm wondering, maybe people who are kind of more specialized in writing styles and calligraphy have any views on that. But anyway, never mind. Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay, I think I have the last question, or is there more? All right. So I just wanted to ask you, as like personally, what got you interested in?
Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. Hello, it's me. What got you interested in this subject, and how is the response in Spain? How is the funding? Like, are people really excited about this kind of research? Are they worried about it? I would like to know all of that. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, my interest is, as I said at the beginning, is the language. I work in the history of the language, diachronics, also dialectology. So my interest is the language, and this test for for the history of the Spanish language are very, very important, because at this time in Aragon, we have few manuscripts, few documents of the Christians. So this is important because they transmit or they offer a language far from the norm, a language more natural, a language that reveals phenomenon and reveals many things for the history of the Spanish, of the Aragonese language. The reception of these studies in Spain, like in other parts of the world, is poor. We have a problem to access this text, that is the Arabic script. So for the Hispanics, for the people who work in the history of the language, there is a lack of interest. There is a lack of interest, yeah. So, more questions? We have time.
You very much for your presentation. It
Thank
was
you.
really wonderful. I really appreciated it and saw so many similarities with Ajami type writings in West Africa in terms of, well, in many levels. But I wanted to ask you, you said about the comparison with, the Aljamiado with Mudéjar and other. And so I was wondering if you can expand a little bit on that. Have you done any of sort of comparative works? Not necessarily, but in terms of the calligraphic fixtures, not necessarily just between Aljamiado, but with other production in other regions, not necessarily, of course, of Aljamiado, but of other writing. Just in terms of the comparative, in terms of the idea of a school of writing, that type of thing. I'm just, curious.
You mean with other manuscript production?
Yes.
Well, there's some similarity to the manuscripts, African manuscripts. In some way, this is different, but there is some similarity in the letter. Yeah. So in the case of the Iberian Peninsula, we have only this production. We have also some notations in Catalan, Aljamiado Catalan, that in terms of calligraphy, in terms of paleography, are similar. But, well, it's true that with the African manuscripts, manuscripts, for example, from Timbuktu, there is some similarities. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. And sorry for my English.
شكرا لكم جميعا. استراحة غذاء، نرجع إن شاء الله الساعة 1:30 ونذكر حضراتكم سماعات الترجمة نسيبها على المقاعد الخاصة بنا إن شاء الله.